With the recent release of the second watch from the Erebus watch company, I think it might now be the perfect time to look back at the Erebus origin and do my full review. A watch that I've owned for more than a month and that I've been wearing. A watch that I've been enjoying and that I really like having in my collection. However, I'm finding that I've had two main problems. One of which is probably going to end up being the reason why I end up selling this watch. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And yes, there's some hype around Erebus again because there is now a new release that is in the pre-order phase. And I'm a little bit excited about it too, but what it has done is it's drawn me back to the origin. It has drawn me back to their first release watch, and it has made me rethink what I like about it and what I don't like about it, and makes me want to share my experiences with you. And if you want to buy one of these watches, they are actually still available, or at least there are some still available, because when you look on their website, you'll see that some models, some colors are still in stock and you can purchase them now. Some others, like the one I'm going to show you today, the orange dial, has been sold out. And if you are going to buy one of these today, one of these ones that is still available, they're 515 Australian dollars. And if you haven't bought one already, there's probably a reasonable chance that you are going to be looking to buy one because you're looking at the watch, rather than the little bit of hype around it, rather than the idea to support Jody and Stephen with this launch of this company. Because when I bought this watch, supporting them was part of my purchase. It was part of the reason why I made the purchase, but it wasn't the only reason. Of course, when I buy watches that I want to own, I want to wear, I want in my collection, and that is why predominantly I bought this watch. But I am aware that there is a little bit of inbuilt bias here, a little bit of positivity towards Just One More Watch, towards Jody, and therefore towards his watch. So I'm going to try my best today to put that bias, that positivity aside, and just look at the watch as it stands, as it is in front of me, as it is on my wrist. I'm also very much aware of the different opinions that there are about this watch online, because there seems to be two very distinct, very separate opinions. There's first of all a huge amount of positivity, almost over the top, talking about how incredible this watch is, how amazing this watch is, it's the best watch on the planet. But then there's other people who are saying that this is a very plain, basic, generic looking watch that really looks like a different version of a helm. Now, I like helm watches, so that doesn't put me off, but I certainly understand both sides of this argument. And perhaps it's not really an argument in this particular sense, it's just two opinions. People that are really sort of positive about this watch, and others that are perhaps standing back and going, is it that great? Is it really that good? Should you actually own one? Perhaps people are getting a little bit excited because it's from Jody, not because of the watch itself. But trying to put those opinions aside and my own positivity towards Just One Watch aside, why did I actually end up buying this watch? Why have I actually ended up wearing this watch? Well, one of the main and the key reasons why I did is because of the dimensions. Of course, dimensions are important. A watch has to sit on my wrist and I have to enjoy those dimensions for that particular style. And of course, I think they've chosen some really good dimensions, because the case itself of this watch is 41 millimeters. The height is 12.8. The lug to lug is 47. The lug width is a nice standard 20 millimeters. That tapers down to the clasp down to 18 millimeters, and sized up to my 17 centimeter wrist, it is 160 grams. And on my 17 centimeter wrist, it feels nice, it sits well, and it's nice and balanced. And when it comes to dive watches, having a balanced watch is important, and it's not always something that is attained depending on the watch. So I think they've done fairly well here to ensure that it sits nicely on wrist, no matter how you wear it. I prefer to wear watches a little bit loose. I like to have that little bit of movement, especially on a bracelet. So to have it sort of sit nice on wrist, to feel balanced, is something that is important to me, and it's something that has been achieved with this watch. And if you look back at the website, you'll see that there were lots of colors that were available. Some of them still available, but for me, I looked at this watch, and when I was deciding to choose which one I wanted, I saw and thought about one of those sort of arguments, that idea that this perhaps is a slightly generic looking watch. I had a little bit of a suspicion that that was possibly part of this watch. So I chose to do something which I think is the right decision for these watches. I chose a bright color. I chose this orange color. But what I didn't expect from this watch was how vibrant this orange would be. I like orange dials and watches. I think it really works, especially with dive watches. I enjoy it. I've owned a few and I'm likely to own more in the future. But this orange, this is something completely different. This is vibrant. This jumps off that watch dial, especially when it is in the sun. And when it is in the sun, you'll see that there's actually a little bit of a texture to that dial as well, which really adds to that effect. And it sort of looks past any possible thoughts about this watch being generic or plain, and it just stands out off the wrist. And for me, a dive watch, that actually is a good idea, because you want some sort of generic nature to it, because you want it to be easy to read, you want it to be legible, you want it to be a tool. Dive watches are tool watches, and this was designed to be a tool watch. So having that big splash of color has been a really nice sort of balance to that tool aspect of this watch. Now everything that's on the dial, the hour markers, the minute markers, is all printed on, including that Erebus logo, and they're printed on in black, which of course, black with that orange really does match well. And I like that they've chosen with this 6 o'clock date wheel to be black as well. They haven't color matched it. And I think that has been a great decision, because if it was color matched, it would kind of disappear a little bit. And I like that there's this strong black and orange sort of differences in colors. It really makes this watch stand out and even more vibrant. And of course, they've done that with those hands too, with that really dark black handset, really contrasts with that orange background, making this a very, very legible watch, which leads back to that tool aspect of it. A tool dive watch with great visual legibility is something that really works well with this one, and it's definitely something that I think they've tried to do deliberately. So it's definitely achieved something that they were looking to do. And of course, knowing Jody and his absolute love of lume, this watch has lots of lume. For me, lume is not that important. I do like it, I enjoy it. I enjoy that sort of pop of it when you sort of walk outside and walk back inside, but it's not really a reason for me to buy a watch. I don't need it to last throughout the night, but of course, this one absolutely lasts throughout the night. That dial is covered by a flat piece of sapphire crystal with AR coating, further helping that legibility. And it then is surrounded by that unidirectional 120 click bezel. Absolutely no back play as well, which is nice. Nice grip to it as well. Does feel nice, does sound nice. And then when you move beyond that, there's a nice easy way to describe this watch. You can describe it as all brushed, because the case back, the bracelet, the clasp, all brushed. But when you close your eyes and actually feel this watch, you don't obviously see the brushed aspects to it. You don't see the visual aspects to it, but you feel the quality of this watch, and you feel it specifically in the bracelet. You can tell that there is something a little bit extra put into this watch because of the bracelet. And this is something I feel about lots of watches. When I hold a watch, when it has a certain feel to it, when I close my eyes, it's always the bracelet that sort of gives me an elevated feel of sort of luxury or sort of details, or something that makes me enjoy the watch more. And this one has exactly that. And I think that feel definitely partly comes from the taper of the bracelet, the all brushed nature of the bracelet, the height of the bracelet when you're looking up and down on the links themselves, and those individual links. It also then leads into this on the fly milled clasp, which I don't mind. I think it's very useful. I'm not 100% convinced about the visual elements with the screws on the side, but it doesn't affect the on-wrist experience. And when you look past that onto the case back, you can see a nice deep etched logo of the Erebus there. The Erebus logo is also deeply etched onto that crown, which is semi-guarded. And this watch is powered by the Seiko NH35, which I think is the right choice for this watch. It's the right choice for this price range of watch, because you're going to get the reliability, you're going to get the accuracy, and you're going to get a watch which you know is going to last and not have issues with the movement for long periods of time, because it is that Seiko movement. This watch also has 200 meters of water resistance, as you would expect with a dive watch. It has to have at least 200 meters if you're going to go diving with it. But that leads me on to, what do I like about this watch? What don't I like about it? And what would I change? And it's definitely going to start with that orange dial. If it didn't have this orange dial, I think I'd be struggling to find the wow factor behind it. I like a little bit of wow factor, and it doesn't actually have to be anything too specific. It just needs to be something that makes me think, wow. And this orange dial definitely makes me think, wow. But I also like the dimensions of this watch. I think they're a good set of dimensions. I love the legibility, the use of the black with that orange, and the overall quality of this watch. And one thing I actually do also like about this watch is that I think it's achieved what they set out to try to achieve with this watch, creating a tool diver with some interesting and different varieties of dials. And when you have a watch that looks like this, that is priced like this, really, it is hard to pick negatives. It's hard to pick out something on it that I don't specifically like. But if I was to be a little bit picky, I would say that those screws on that clasp are probably not my favorite visual element. It doesn't really change the watch. You're not really looking at it specifically, or at least I'm not concentrating too much on it. But if I was to be picky, that's probably something that I don't love about it. But there are probably some things that I would like to change about it to probably give it a little bit more to it. I'd love to see some applied markers. And when I say that, I don't mean big applied markers. I don't think it needs a lot of depth on that dial beyond what's already there, but it would be nice to see a little bit, even if it was sort of maybe heaped up lume somehow, or something that just gave a little bit more of a visual element. Perhaps even just an applied Erebus logo would be enough just to give the dial one more visual element that would make it stand out. I personally myself would also like to have a chamfered polished edge, but that's my own personal opinion because I love watches that have mixtures of polished and brushed. And for me, all brushed, no matter the watch, an Erebus or another watch, I would always say that I'd like to have some mixtures in finishing. And that brings me to the two problems, one of which is probably the reason why I'm going to end up selling this watch. The first one is what I've already been talking about, what people have been saying, that there is a slight bland or slight generic nature to this watch, to the design of this watch. Now for me, generic or bland is not a negative. I understand some people see that as a negative. For me, when it comes to a tool watch, a watch like this, a dive watch, something that you are actually going to wear and use, I don't see that as a negative. If I was buying a very expensive, beautifully made dress watch and I describe that as generic or bland, well then that might be an issue. But this watch is not one of those watches. This is a tool watch. This is designed to be used and worn and enjoyed. So for me, generic or bland isn't a negative. The issue that I've had with this watch is more of a personal thing. The issue I have with this watch is as a part of my own collection. I have some nice watches in my collection. There are some affordable watches, mid-range watches, and a couple of slightly more expensive watches, but it's a collection that I've been sort of achieving over a number of years, refining over a number of years. Having this channel means I've been sort of supercharged my collecting and been buying watches, selling watches, refining what I really like. So I've ended up with some watches that I really connect with, watches that I really love. And adding this one now, at this point in my collecting, means that it doesn't quite fit. There are other watches that I would reach for and pick before this Erebus. And it's almost disappointing to me because I wish this watch had come out 4 or 5 years ago. If this watch had come out 4 or 5 years ago, then this watch would probably be the best watch in my collection. This would be the center of my collection. It would be one of my favorite watches in my collection. But at this point in my collecting life, it's not that watch for me. It's a nice watch. It's an easy watch to wear. It's a great tool watch. It's a great everyday watch. If I was going diving, it would probably be the watch that I reach for. But at this point in my collecting, it's not quite the right watch for me. It's lovely, it's fine, it's well made, it's well priced, but it's probably going to leave my collection for those reasons. But those personal reasons to me will not affect you guys, unless you happen to be in a similar situation to me. So if you are considering buying one of these ones, I definitely would keep that in mind. Look at your own collection and ask the question, does this Erebus fit into this collection? Am I going to wear it? Why am I going to buy it? Ensure that that decision is made correctly. And if this one doesn't fit correctly into your collection, well, it might be worthwhile, especially right now, looking at their new model they've just released. Thanks for watching, guys. Maybe check these videos out next.